Hello, class. Right now I want to talk to you about the policy analysis paper. I know that's probably stressing a lot of you out, and you're thinking about the requirements for it. So I want to go over the basic requirements for the policy analysis paper. I'm going to talk about the actual topic proposal, which is the one-pager that you need to submit first so we can get approval of your topic, make sure you're on the right track. And then later I'll talk about the executive summary that you'll do later with the policy analysis paper. So basically there's three major portions to this assignment. It's the topic proposal, which is the one-pager that you need to submit. And then after that you'll submit a draft, full version draft of your policy analysis paper. I'll review that, edit it, get it back to you, and then you'll complete a final policy proposal, policy analysis paper that will be due usually about a month after. So you'll check the dates and the due dates for it in the syllabus and on the learning platform, and make sure you get all of that information. But I also want to talk to you about the common errors and issues that are associated that I see often with policy papers. I want to make sure you do this right. So the main thing with the policy analysis paper, just an overview, it is for you to analyze a particular law, policy, regulation. It's best that your paper is attached or is looking at a recent law, maybe at the federal level, state, county, local level, or policy, rule, or regulation. It's not the differences that make it for a policy paper and a research paper. Research paper, you're looking at a different type of topic. Maybe it's broader, it could even be narrower, but it's on a particular issue or subject of your concern that you want to do research in. The policy analysis paper, because that's what this class is about, is analyzing and dealing with issues or problems associated normally with some type of legislation that's working, that's not working, a law that's been recently passed, maybe it's not being implemented properly or being conducted properly at a level, or maybe it wasn't funded properly. So you may be looking at things that are dealing in child welfare, substance abuse, mental health, but I want to make sure you narrow down that. So that's why we have you submit the topic proposal, which is a one-pager. And there's a grading rubric associated with that, and that should be posted online for you to be able to review. You should already be able to see that policy and grading rubric. So here on slide 2, I just kind of did a snapshot of it so you can kind of see it in a big picture. So the policy analysis paper, proposal, it's one page, and it includes an introductory summary, purpose, the approach that you're going to take to analyze the policy. Remember, in the textbook, as well as in the last 2 or 3 election discussion slides, I talked about, and it's shown in those slides and in the presentation, about how to do the analysis paper. There's different methods and models. So what's going to be your approach, how you're going to do it? One of the first things that you need to do is to make sure you narrow down your topic. So go out and do your research on your particular law or policy that you're interested in. That research is looking at policy journal articles, peer-reviewed journal articles. I mean, these are articles published by professors, including ours in social work and across the country. They publish articles in academic journals and periodicals, and they're reviewed. Those academic journals have a peer review, meaning there's a board of other professors that review those articles to make sure the articles and the research were done according to scientific standards and proven results. And so those articles are published in a variety of journals. You can get access to those through the library, online access library as well. You can also go to the library and get those. JSTOR is one of the bigger compilation it has of a lot of different academic journals that you can do a research and subject into. Part of the requirement for the policy paper is to have some sources from peer-reviewed journal articles. So I want to make sure that you're doing that. Narrow down your topic. So what is the concern? You're trying to find a law or policy that's been recently passed, and that there may be an issue associated with it. One of the big challenges I see that students have with the policy paper is that they are interested in an area. They just pick a law or a topic or rule or regulation, but they're not sure if there's really a problem there. They may have a perception that it is, but they're not sure. So you want to make sure that you have a problem that you have identified with a particular law. I'm not looking at something for you to do a policy analysis of a law that was done 10, 15, 20 years ago. We're wanting you to do something that's recent, like in the last 2 or 3 years, that's either been passed or that's been proposed. Primarily by an elected official, could have been proposed by an advocacy group or a nonprofit group. What legislation has been proposed, state, federal, county, city level, all at those different levels that you are interested in, there appears to be a problem with it. And then you'll do research on that topic and then be able to determine and write up a proposal. And your proposal is going to introduce what that particular law is that you're looking at, or regulation or policy, the importance of it to social work, and then you're going to understand and try to define what the problem is associated with it. What is the impact of the problem that's happening with this particular law? How is it being implemented? Is it an urgent issue? That's what you need to identify. Make sure there is some type of perceived problem associated with the topic that you're looking for. Also, in your proposal paper, remember, we're looking at just on one page. I want you to be able to identify any current issues associated with any findings, recent findings that you may be aware of based upon maybe a nonprofit group or a think tank group that has access to it or that's advocating for or against the issues. You also want to discuss how it's important to social welfare. Again, make sure you look at the references that you're citing. This is your time to do the research on the topic to really make sure it's what you're looking for and what you want to do. The best way to write a paper, any paper, a research paper, a policy analysis paper, is to first read. Do a lot of reading on the topic that you're interested in. Do research on it and find a lot of information. You become somewhat of a subject matter expert on your particular area. Then you can later start to put pen to paper. Oftentimes students jump right into the writing. They'll go and pull one research article, read it, and then start trying to write it. That's not the way to do it. Pull a lot of research articles, read through them, scan through them, highlight them, and indicate information that you're interested in. Then after you've learned a lot about the topic, then later you can begin to do the writing portion. It will save you a lot of time both in the draft and the final. This is the time for you to really go out and spend 2 or 3 hours really researching the topic that you're interested in, researching that law, that policy or rule, and read through it and make sure this is what you want. Once you submit that policy paper, the proposal, you're going to upload it, submit it into, if it's either Blackboard or Canvas, depending on the class that you're in, upload that document, and then I'll review it. And I'm going to review it to make sure you have a topic that's very narrow. You're not trying to save the whole world with this policy paper. Remember, eventually you're only going to write 6 to 8 pages for your policy analysis paper. So we don't want something that's too broad that would take you 20 or 30 pages to write, or that you would need a co-author to support. This is just a very narrow topic. And so when you submit that, I'll review it, make sure you have a good topic that's narrow and focused, that's connected to some type of bill, law, legislation at the federal, state, local, city level, and that there's a problem identified with it, and that you'll be able to truly be able to write up a policy analysis to analyze it on both sides, being objective, and then coming to some recommended solutions following the grading rubric. So I'll review that, I'll get that back to you, and with the comments and edits, and then tell you to move forward from there. Or if I think you need to come in and we narrow the topic down a little bit more for you, or if you need to really choose another topic, so you're not going through several weeks and then finding out that this isn't the right topic for you. So this is an assignment that is worth a percentage of your grade. It's connected to the whole policy paper, but it also has its own independent grade. You will upload this, I'll edit it, I'll get it back to you. The next thing, once you get it back, then you need to start working on your draft policy paper. When you submit this draft policy paper, you're going to submit it as a complete whole document. All sections that are outlined in the grading rubric will be submitted. I will review it again. I'll edit it and see if you have the proper content, particularly for the different sections that are outlined in the grading rubric. I'll try to catch as much of the grammar and AP style that I can, and then make sure that you're on target for your paper. You'll then take back the draft, you'll revise it, edit it, and then finally submit the final policy paper. I've found this to be the most effective way for students to, 1, learn how to really write a policy paper and any research paper. 2, you'll be able to get that information back so you can edit it, so you can learn from yourself, and then you actually earn a better grade because you get a chance to go back and revise the paper and then turn in a better product, a final product. Now, when you turn in your draft, you'll get it back, you'll actually get a grade for it. You turn in your final paper later, a few weeks later. I will go back and revise the draft policy paper grade, depending on how much you've improved on your final policy paper. So what I tell most students, if you look at the date for the due date for the draft policy paper, and you put in your mind that this is the date that the paper is actually due, and you submit it, when I get the paper back to you, edited it, you really only have minor edits to do, and you're pretty much done. And you can then focus on other classwork and kind of sit back and relax. But if you wait till the last minute and try to get the draft in, it probably will be of poor quality. So I want to make sure that you take your time and go through it. In the draft policy paper and in the final policy paper, you're going to take what you've done with the topic proposal, and then you're going to follow the grading rubric. There's an executive summary, one-page summary page that you'll have to do that's connected to the policy paper. I recommend to most students to write that after you've completed all the other sections of your policy paper. Then you'll go back and do the executive summary and add that to the front. The executive summary is a one-page, separate page. That's all packaged together based upon APA standards in your policy paper, and it's a summary of your entire policy proposal, policy paper. Oftentimes, policy papers in the field, if you're doing community administrative practice, or you're with a nonprofit or a government agency and you're submitting these policy proposals to legislators, elected officials, stakeholders, most of them already have a good idea of what you're talking about, and many of them are very busy. So oftentimes your executive summary, that one page, is what they read, or they'll read that and then they'll read your conclusion section, and that's all. So your one-page executive summary is basically just the mini version of your whole policy paper. So it has a little bit of information from each of the sections that are required in your policy paper. Make sure you divide your policy paper into subheadings. I've uploaded in the online platform for our class examples of policy papers. The only difference with those policy papers, they're just a little bit longer, written by former students, but also they do not have subheadings. But make sure you include the subheadings in your policy paper. The subheadings will allow you to see if you're missing content as you go through it. And it's easier on the reader when you submit the subheadings. They know what to look for. So when you have your executive summary, you'll have an introduction, which is about a page long, approximately a page long, that effectively introduces your topic again. So it's expanding on what you did in the topic proposal. You're going to identify the affected populations, the impact of it, all the different areas we have been talking about and will continue to talk about in analyzing policies during the course lecture and discussions. So you want to clearly explain what the social welfare policy issue is and the importance of it in your introductory. And then you'll go to an historical background review of the legislation or the policy. This is not, what I often see students have challenges with here is that they'll end up writing 2, 3, 4 pages. Half their paper is on the history of it. The history of the legislation, the law, the policy, or the main issue should only be about a page. Again, remember, you're providing this document primarily to people who are already familiar with the issue. So they pretty much have a good history. So you're just looking at an overview, the broad perspectives of the issue, of the historical history of it. So when the policy was created, when the law was originally passed, was it amended throughout the time? What was it intended to address? What issue? So you just kind of a broad brush, about a page, describing the history of the legislation. Right here on slide 3 and 4, on slide 4 and 5, it talks about the executive summary, again, that one page at the front. So just make sure you review that. I'll also have these slides uploaded in the online learning platform, so you can go ahead and read through the more of the information about the executive summary that will be part of the draft and the final policy paper. The other issue, then the next section, you'll go into the description of the policy. This is a very important part of it. Again, this is about a page long, and you really will be effectively describing what truly is the problem or the issue that's happening. What is going on? What was the intended reason for the policy? Why was it created? Some of the highlights, what are the logistical issues related to the policy? What are the intended goals? Why was it originally created? And you notice the points on the side for the grading rubric. When you get to these sections, like the description of the policy, and really with the major issues and problems in section E, that's 18 points, quite a big area. So in the major problems and issues, this is really what you're defining. What are all the concerns and issues on both sides, the pros and the cons, both sides of the issue, who are looking at it, who's opposing it, who's for the legislation. Evaluate the legislation as is it addressing a social problem? What are the proposals, the possibilities for reform of the policy? Make sure you clearly have defined what the problems are. That's one of the bigger challenges I see students have, is not being able to define the problem clearly. The next section, another big section, is to look through the social thought and social ideology. So we talked a little bit in class already, and we'll continue to, about political ideology, social ideology. This is where you explain the different sides. The liberal version, how do liberals support or do not support this particular legislation? The conservative viewpoint, maybe the radical left, or you can see the far right, libertarian view, Democrat versus Republican. What are the viewpoints on your legislation, on this policy analysis and this legislation. All so far through this paper, you're being objective. Not interjecting opinions. You're not being subjective. You're being objective. You're showing both sides of the argument. Something similar to what a lawyer would do in a courtroom. You want to make sure that you may be defending or prosecuting your client, but you want to also bring up the issues the other side would bring up. And then later you can use that to refute it. But you want to make sure you're being objective throughout, explaining both sides. The other issue that you might have in sociology, social ideology, is looking at the perspectives of the role of the government in this policy. What is our real role? What are we expecting from this? What are the community is expecting from this? And that's what you explain in the social thought and ideology section. And then finally, you'll go to the conclusion, which is about another page. Conclusion is where you wrap up the paper. You bring in both sides. You've discussed all the different sides. This is where you can begin to be a little bit more subjective and giving your recommendations on what should improve the policy or the law. And your recommendations should be connected to what you've mentioned earlier throughout the paper and your reasoning behind it. Oftentimes students get to this point maybe because they've waited to the last minute and they're uploading it, trying to finish it an hour before it's due, and their conclusion, it's too abruptly. They close too abruptly. You should have about a page, almost a page, where you're concluding and wrapping it up in a nice, smooth, feasible way, providing useful recommendations to improve a policy. Remember throughout your paper, now if there's a policy that's going to need additional funding, you need to discuss that in the problem areas. You need to discuss that when you're talking about social and political ideology. Talk about the economic feasibility issues. So you don't want to get to the end and the conclusion and say, okay, yes, I recommend to do this, and it's going to take $10 billion. Well, then it may not be a very feasible policy recommendation. So you want to make sure that you're thinking through that always. Extra credit opportunities for the policy analysis paper. If you reach out, we have a writing center here in the School of Social Work with the writing center with Dr. Chris Kilgore. If you reach out to him, if you do one of his online webinars, if you do one of his face-to-face presentations, you attend one of those. If you make an appointment and you meet with Dr. Kilgore to go over your policy paper, or if you email it to him and he works with you, you do an email appointment or you do a web online appointment, you will receive extra credit for that. If you reach out to me to make an appointment to go over, help you with the research or the paper and talk to you about it and your topic, we work through that. You can receive extra credit that way, both face-to-face interview, online. I can do a web with you, and I can also do a phone conference with you, because we want to make sure that you clearly can get everything you need in doing this policy paper. Again, I recommend to you and remind you that it's the beginning. This is the early part of the time frame. This is where you need to invest your energy in order to make it easier when you begin to write your paper, that you've gotten a good topic, you've narrowed it down, you've done good research, you've read about it, just read on the topic, make sure this is the one for you, then do that one-page policy proposal, following the grading rubric, get that uploaded, I'll take a look at it and get it back to you, and then you can work on your draft and your final. So your paper is 6 to 8 pages long, and it includes the sections I previously talked about. Now, make sure you include in there following APA style. You have a reference list, scholarly research, make sure it includes all the different areas that we've talked about that's listed here in the grading rubric, listing of your references and your peer-reviewed articles. There's points for that. You can also lose points also for not having proper AP and grammar style, and I'll talk about that a little bit in just a minute here. And make sure you have a separate page of key definitions and terms. Those are just listing some of the definitions and terms that may not be clear to the reader, and that they understand that you define those, and that's just in a separate page. It's not counted in the 6 to 8 pages. So some of the common errors and issues. Primarily I see with students often is the grammar. Run-on sentence, fragments, splint infinitives, and really spelling. Surprisingly, with the spell check, I do see the misspellings. So one of the key things I tell a lot of students to cut back on grammar issues, if you know that's not really your strong suit, the best thing to do in any policy paper, research paper, and this one as well, keep your sentences short, 1 to 2 lines long. So if you're writing a paper, if you start to see you're going past that 2 lines, there's a big chance, the longer your sentence is, the chance goes up, the greater chance increases that you're going to have a grammar issue. So I tell students, keep them short, keep them simple. That's the best way. Good subject-verb agreement, short sentences. You're not trying to write, 2-3 lines long. That's when you begin to get the run-ons. Just make sure you have single focus sentences, one idea, go back to the basics, just subject-verb agreement, and you're better off with that. Make sure you're following proper APA style. And you can go to the Purdue OWL online website. It shows you all the APA style. Make sure you're doing proper citation and proper attribution. Cite your sources and facts. Leave out your opinions in the paper. Let your experts and the research that you've done speak for themselves. Quote them in your paper. You can paraphrase it. Just make sure you cite the source. On average, just about almost every paragraph that you write in a paper probably in one way or the other has to have some citation attributed to it, that you're doing an in-text citation or you've directly quoted someone. Go back and look at your paper. If you're missing some of that, it's probably a good chance that you're not citing properly. That's one of the big issues I see with students not properly citing. They have information they're putting out there. Maybe they've read it somewhere or they're injecting their own information, but they're not citing sources where you got that information from. Also work a little bit on your better word usage. Again, keep your sentences short and concise. Will save you a lot of trouble later. Keep them short and concise and make sure you're citing. Try to eliminate any contractions in your papers. That's now and moving forward. Do not do the don'ts, the I's, could have, just keep them. If it's don't, do not. Spell it out. One of the reasons why this one, in most of papers now, we want you to keep that separate. The other thing is your chances of having a grammar problem or issue, they go up exponentially when you begin to try to use contractions because it throws off the subject-verb agreement. So spell them out. Try to not end sentences with semicolons. Usually if you're thinking about a semicolon, more than likely you can just end it with a period. Semicolons, again, that's another area. If you overuse it, it's a great chance you're going to have grammar issues. It's best just to do a nice, straightforward subject-verb, short, concise sentence, end it with a period, and move on. The other area I see students have challenges, not enough content in some of the areas of the subheadings of the paper. So make sure you have enough content that will cover your paper that's effective, strong, informative content, particularly in those areas where there's a lot of points that are required for describing the policies and issues, talking about the problems, and the social policy and social ideology. Again, make sure your policy paper is focusing on a law, a bill, a pending legislation, a policy, rule, or regulation. It could be, again, at the county, state, city, or federal level, but make sure it's connected to that. You are analyzing a bill, a policy, or a law. Make sure you have all your credible sources. Any sources that you use in the paper, make sure you're listing them in the reference list at the end. And make sure you're using all of your sources that you're required to do. Again, no abrupt endings. Please do not have, your paper should not have I, me, my, no first person in policy papers. You can say the research shows according to, but no, I did this or I think this. It's according to the research, this is what's happening. But eliminate first person usage in your papers. Finally, be careful with plagiarizing. Most of the time when I see plagiarizing or issues with that, it's usually because the student did not properly do the citing. The in-text citation is it's probably the easiest way to help you avoid plagiarism. So make sure you go back through, again, kind of a rule of thumb, just about every paragraph, probably a couple of times in a paragraph, you should be citing a source, whether it's in-text citations or if you're directly quoting. If you do that, you're pretty much straight as long as you are citing the right information from the right sources. And a lot of that comes back to when you're doing your initial research, when you're reading, you're doing the highlighting, and you're putting little marks where things you're probably going to use in your paper. In your sources, do not cite Wikipedia, dictionary.com, Britannica.com, all of those different areas. Do not cite those as sources. Now, Wikipedia can be helpful in getting you to the right sources. Oftentimes you go to Wikipedia, you read an article, there's a lot of those references listed at the bottom. If you go to some of those references, some of them are quite credible, and they can then drive you to good research. And you can then cite those references when you go to them for the research, or they can take you on to something else. Because that's what a lot of research does. It kind of takes you along until you get to the right credible sources that you need. So don't quote Wikipedia, dictionary.com, Britannica.com, things like that, encyclopedia.com. But you can use, particularly on Wikipedia, some of those that lead you to the credible references that created that Wikipedia page or those sources. Make sure you're truly addressing a real problem or policy issue. If there's not really a problem with it, you need to find it out earlier when you're looking at the topic. But if it really isn't a true problem that you can identify, then there's no need to go through the whole exercise of doing a policy analysis paper. It won't be reviewed by anyone. It won't be used by any organization. So it's not a good way to go through it. So make sure you have a true problem that's relatively identifiable to the average person. Spell out any acronyms of first use. First time you see something that has an acronym associated with it, and generally spell it out, and then later you can use those acronyms. Again, the big issue about too much conjecture, too much assumptions. Let the facts speak for themselves. Don't let your voice get into the paper by stating things that are not cited by credible experts in the field. Remember, when you're doing the policy analysis and doing your research papers, you're not the expert. The expert are your sources and references that you've been researching. They are your experts. Let them speak in your paper. Let them cite that, particularly with facts and statistics and other information you're pulling in. Again, no opinions. This is not an editorial. You can use, of course, direct quote usage. Follow APA style. Your direct quotes should generally be very short direct quotes. If you do a long, I think it's, I can't remember the word usage number, but it's like more than 40 words, I believe, you have to follow the APA block style. So just go to the APA. You can do the online reference and check and see that you follow that. Again, be concise, have proper paragraph indentation, good transitions from one thought to another in your sentences and your paragraph structure, and good transitions from paragraph to paragraph and from section to section. Follow the proper style for quoting, like in this one listed here. Make sure you have your open and closed quotation marks appropriately. That first one, writing is a struggle against science, Carlo Fuentes asserts, is missing the comma and the closed quotation. So you have the open quotation, the comma, and then the closed quotation. The closed quotation always goes after the comma, and then Carlos Fuentes asserts or states. Okay? These are some good resources. I also have quite a bit of resources listed in our online class platform that you can go to online, the Purdue Online Writing Lab for APA. You have the UTA library. Remember, we have a library liaison who can help you with research journal articles. The library fee, that's part of the fees that you pay as a student, so make sure you use the university library as well. Other things and just go through, there's some other links I have out there, common grammar mistakes, punctuation. Again, you'll be turning in first the policy proposal, one-page policy proposal, topic proposal, following the grading guide. I'll review that. I'll get it back to you. Then you'll work on your draft policy paper, completely finish it, all sections, submit that. Then I'll revise and edit it and get that back to you. And then you'll turn in later, a few weeks later, your final policy proposal. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to me through my email. You can also text if I haven't replied to the email within a day or so. And you can, if it's an urgent issue, you can always give me a call. I ask you again to please go out, do reading, research on your topic. It's something hopefully that you're passionate about, but make sure it's surrounded by an issue, a true problem that's happening of concern, and it's related and connected to a law, a policy, rule, or regulation that you're analyzing. Again, take care, and if there's anything else, please reach out to me.